Okay, we will be starting, I'm going to wait a little bit after 12 o'clock because I've noticed that sometimes people start to arrive almost exactly at the moment and maybe even 5 minutes later. So appreciate so much those of you who did come on time. And if you have any questions or things you want to ask her before we get going, that's okay. But if not, just sit back and relax and know that we will start fairly soon.
If you guys don't have questions for me, actually I have a question for you guys. Why are you here? Are you curious about the Arctic? You want to go to the Arctic? Why are you here? Because, you know, it's an hour and a half of your precious life. Besides people who work here and have to be here. Why are you here?
Well, I think the location there is amazing, and I've not been there before, so I want to have a look and hear your speech.
Cool,
great,
awesome.
thank you.
Anyone else? I'm really curious because I'll be the only one talking,
So, yeah,
mostly.
so was it the Arctic? What?
I think your art is very beautiful and different from what we always see in the Longyearbyen, and I want to see some difference.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really a treat for me to really know why you're here and what you want to hear, because it might affect the way I give the presentation, because if you tell me what you want, I'll give it to you within my power.
Let's see. You have anything to
Yeah,
share?
I think he wants to share.
Yeah.
I am interested in Arctic and art and these two elements, and how can you combine them, and yeah, and it's just something that I have never heard before. So, and also another thing is that my Thursday is really free, and I'm
I envy you.
and I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Okay, so what brought you here?
I just want to know more about things that I didn't know before, and just learn more about the artist.
Okay, thank you. And what everybody who's arriving, we're just kind of getting to know each other so that that way Michelle has a better idea of what we're interested in. So for you, was it the art, was it the Arctic, or something else?
I find the art very interesting and beautiful, and me personally is not very good at art, so I'm not.
It's a myth.
drawing.
We'll change that. If you want to come up to me afterwards, if you could learn how to write or read or speak, you can learn to draw. Absolutely, it's a myth.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yes, it's a myth.
Okay, so what brought you here today?
Personally, I am pretty interested in different style of art, and I would like to see if there is something that I've never seen in my life.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, so this is really interesting because the thing that, I mean, I knew Michelle's art before, but for me, I was like, wow, Arctic, how amazing. But I'm glad to see that it's also, the art itself is really a draw.
Yeah.
Okay, so more people are arriving. So we're just doing, we'll get to know you. So what brought you here today? Was it the Arctic? Is it the art? Or you have a very free Thursday? Or what do you want to know about from Michelle today before she starts?
For me, the first thing is, of course, I have a free Thursday. And the next thing is that it's the first time I thought a combination of Arctic and art. It really interests me a lot. I'm quite curious about this.
All right, so more people are coming, so I'll give us maybe 1 or 2 more minutes before I do my intro, so people have time to settle down and enjoy. Okay, so yeah, we'll be starting in about 2 minutes.
So if you just came in, if you want just 30 seconds to take a quick look before we begin, I brought a few things to share with you. These are some of the blocks I carved in the Arctic, and these are exactly the same tools I took to the Arctic. So you're welcome to touch and flip through the book. This is what I bought from the Arctic. I will also share a lot from this book. Everything else, if you could just admire with your eyes. And these are 2 of the prints that were created from 2 of the blocks. And if you have questions, you can ask me now, or we'll also have Q&A at the end.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes. Maybe not the books, yeah.
Only the book.
Yeah, the reason that we don't want to touch artworks is because even if our hands are clean, we have oil, and then over time it could damage artworks, yeah.
What's the medium?
It's woodcuts. Yeah, so I use these tools to carve on the wood, and then they're printed. You'll see videos in the presentation, but these are the actual thing.
Okay. Oh, I see a few more people walking rapidly. So, okay. So maybe when, oh no, she's just going to the water fountain. Okay. So after everybody sits down, I think I will get ready to start. Okay, so welcome all of you to Arctic Journey in Art with Michelle Fung, our wonderful artist. I'm Victoria, and I'll be the moderator today. And as you can already tell, Michelle's a very interactive speaker. Now, she's an interdisciplinary artist. She's showing us her woodcuts today, but she uses other media as well. And her lifelong oeuvre, other known as her body of work, is around a grand dystopian world-building narrative set in the year 2084. Her works have been presented extensively in international museums, galleries, university exhibitions, and film festivals. She's a friend of UST. Her solo exhibition, Plastic, Plastic Everywhere, was held here in 2019. Okay, and you can see more about that on her website. She holds a BFA from the University of British Columbia in Canada and an MVA from the Hong Kong Baptist University here in Hong Kong. So last fall, she went to the world's northernmost town, and how do you pronounce that?
Longyearbyen.
Okay, Longyearbyen, because I was going to say Longyearbyen. Okay, thank you.
Close enough, very good.
To participate in the Arctic Circle, a 17-day residency program where international artists, filmmakers, and musicians lived and worked on board a ship. And so today's talk she'll be sharing about this extraordinary experience. So please note that today's talk is being recorded by remote video capture, and that, as you can see, our photo team is taking photos. So again, please join me in welcoming our wonderful artist, Michelle Fung.
Thank you everyone for coming and giving me a precious hour and a half of your life. I'm so excited to be here, and before we begin, I also heard half of you are really interested in the Arctic and half of you are really interested in the arts, and that's really interesting for me. In today's presentation, we'll do kind of like half and half, so that should satisfy you. And before I jump in, I want to remind you to really pay attention, because at the end, there will be prizes for people who listen and can answer questions. And these prizes are not for sale. Yes, so they're really special. All right. So what is Svalbard? Where is Longyearbyen? How far is it? So last fall, as Victoria said, I went to Svalbard, the island north within the Arctic Circle. So how far is it actually? It's actually, I flew through Oslo up to Longyearbyen. It took 3 hours by flight straight north from Oslo. That's how far north we were in. And Longyearbyen is the world's northernmost town. So this was the Spitsbergen area. We began here and then we sailed around here just to give you a geographical impression. All right, so what kind of town is Longyearbyen? It's so abstract to just see a dot on the map. What does it actually look like? I'm going to show you a few photos. When I went last October to November, it actually turned my world upside down, my world understanding upside down in many ways, but one of them was daytime and nighttime. So I was there for a month, and towards the end, it was almost polar night. Do you know what polar, if you know what that is, nod your head. So polar night is when you have 24 hours of darkness, 0 sunlight. And they have that for 3 months. To the extent that some people just took a sunlight vacation to Norway, just so that they could have 4 hours of sunlight in a day. It's totally serious. There are other social issues that relate to that. Maybe we'll get into it. So towards the end, actually on my last day, we only had 45 minutes of sunlight. And my friend was helping me with photo shoot because I needed just so many photos for my work and all that. And he said, well, okay, let's try it today. If not, we still have tomorrow. In fact, we didn't have tomorrow because the last day was overcast. And during the 45-minute window, it was so dark that even with a tripod, it was just too blurry. So it was that dark. And this was 12 o'clock p.m. The town has about 1,000 people population year-round. There's a river that runs through it. But in fact, when I went to the Tourist Information Center, it was clearly low season, right? So when I went in, they said, yeah, we have maybe 20 people per day this week. But during the summer, guess how many people they have per day? Anyone? Random number?
300.
More.
1,000.
1,000, thank you. Average. So you can see that it's really a tourist town. But Longyearbyen is a bit more than that. I will share that in just a minute. And actually right behind the guest house where I stayed for 2 weeks, it's a glacier. So literally I left my door and then I started hiking on a glacier. In fact, it was so cool. One day I saw someone hold a wedding here outdoors. So everyone was wearing parkas and super thick, not fleece jacket, but super thick jackets. And they were having a wedding. It was just so cool. Longyearbyen actually means the town of Longyear. Bien means town in Norwegian. And what is Longyear? He was a person, so he was an American person, John Longyear, who started the Arctic Coal Company. Longyearbyen began its history in 1906 as a mining town. Yes. So a lot of people ask me afterwards, hey, did you meet any indigenous people in Svalbard? Actually, there are no indigenous people in Svalbard. Literally before the early 1900s, it was wilderness. No people. So right now, Svalbard is actually the international territory of Norway. So it's under Norway, but it's got its own system, everything. Tax, hospital, everyone can go there. If you decide to move there tomorrow, you can, as long as you can pay for yourself. Okay, this is a fun story. So actually, Longyearbyen, because of the lower income tax, and things are actually about 30% cheaper than mainland Norway. So not only do Norwegians take vacations in Svalbard because it's cheaper, but they often move there to save money. And anyone with any passport can move and work there tomorrow, as long as you can pay the taxes and pay your rent and everything else. It's basically still a company mining town with more layers, which I'll get into. But when I was there, I heard a story. There was a prominent American. He started a local newspaper. I think he started a few businesses as well. But his adventures didn't go so well. So he was having financial troubles. And he was running away and running away. He couldn't really pay his expenses. He was staying with friends until one day, literally, the authority came to his door and carried him out and asked him to leave. It's that extreme. So you can stay as long as you can pay your bills. Pretty interesting. So even today, you can still see remnants of mining town. This is on top of a hill. You might see other views of this mining remnant from other photos, but it's forbidden for you to go there. But since especially the 1970s, and especially since the 1990s, Svalbard has also become a research hub because of institutions like the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Some of you might know about it. It's an underground safe, basically, to save all the different varieties of seeds for humanity, so that if one day the apocalypse happens, we still have seeds that we can plant and grow our crops. There's actually a university in Longyearbyen, so there's the Svalbard University. So Longyearbyen is the most international small town I've ever been to. It's got 1,000 people. I've been to a lot of small towns around the world. Iceland, I went to an 800 person town in Iceland. And when I was on my way traveling there, when I transferred flight, I saw faces from Southeast Asia. I heard Mandarin outside the supermarket. It's got a sushi restaurant, it's got Thai supermarkets. It's incredibly international. So it was the only time I feel I walk around a small town and no one stared at me because of my skin color. I just blend in so much because they're so used to foreigners, whether you're there for research or tourism. The cuisine is also spectacular. It's just such an international small town. So in the 1970s, the airport opened in 1975, and yes, you have a polar bear greeting you right at the airport. And yes, I did see a polar bear. You can ask me questions afterwards. And before the airports opened, actually, the locals during winter could not go anywhere. Actually, during my last week, one of my friends, we were hanging out one day, and then he said, okay, what do you want to do before dinner? I said, just take me somewhere beautiful. So he said, okay. So we drove for 5 minutes outside of town. We went up a hill. It was so incredibly beautiful. I felt like it was the end of the world. And then we were talking about polar bears, right? And he said, yeah, actually lately we have more and more polar bear problems. They come into town and they become bolder because they have less to eat, blah, 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 blah. So I asked such a stupid question. And I said, oh, so when the authority takes them away, what do you mean an hour? Like, what do you mean really far? Do you mean like an hour by car? And then he looked at me and he said, Michelle, we're at the end of the road. Like, this is the end of the road. I was like, what do you mean? Like, it's literally 5 minutes outside of town. And he said, yeah, it's really difficult for visitors to comprehend that Svalbard, we have no roads. We travel only by boat and by sleds. So before the airport opened, literally in the winter, they could only travel on ice. So they basically just stayed in town. They had to make sure they had all the food and fuel and everything. The airport changed everything when it opened in 1975. Before I get into the book, one more really, really fun fact. It's actually illegal to give birth or die in Svalbard. That is actually a misconception, almost. So there's no hospital in Svalbard at all. Svalbard is the entire island. But, so if you need to give birth, almost before your time is due, you would travel to Norway so that you could be in a hospital. But you cannot bury corpses in Svalbard, and that is the law. The reason is because when they actually uncovered corpses in the 30s, they found that corpses from the 1916 flu were still not decomposed because of the permafrost. They were completely intact, and they were so worried the viruses would survive and would hurt humanity. That's why if you happen to die in Svalbard, your corpse would be transported to the mainland. This was a book I bought in Svalbard. I'm going to share quite a lot from this book. She moved from Norway to Longyearbyen with her family. She's a journalist, and she talks about a lot of environmental changes in this place because Well, usually in my past presentations, I would say climate change feels very distant. They feel very far away to us in Hong Kong. And I think after the past 3 weeks, it no longer feels very distant. We are experiencing just crazy weather. We don't have snow melting, but we are feeling the effects of climate change. Everyone asked me, oh, it must have been so cold, and how cold? In fact, it wasn't as cold as I thought. Because of the Gulf Stream, actually Svalbard is about 20 degrees Celsius warmer than all the other regions of the same latitude. But Svalbard is also warming a lot faster than the rest of the world. Svalbard is a great environmental paradox. The archipelago is located in the parts of the world that is warming fastest. At the same time, when we look at CO2 emissions per capita, the settlements here are the most polluting in the world. In 2015, the figure was around 75 metric tons of CO2 per person, without taking into account all the emissions from plane and boat traffic. By comparison, the emissions of an average Norwegian was 8.4 tons in 2016, and those of an average global citizen were 4.8 tons. The most important factor in Svalbard's inflated figure is the burning of coal to produce energy, and our tiny population means there are very few of us to share the emissions. Yes, it wasn't that cold, but it was not warm enough to not use heat. So heat is really essential to basically survive. And it's still a coal-burning community. In fact, they declared that in 2019, or 2019, 2020, they said, okay, we're gonna just completely stop coal consumption and coal production in 2 years. And then when COVID hit, they changed their mind. So I haven't checked. Last time I checked, they were still using it. I have not found updated data. We'll see where this goes. So what did I do? Why was I there? I spent 17 days in the official program. The Arctic Circle is a residency, artist residency research program that allows artists and scientists to conduct our own Arctic projects and research. And I spent an extra 10 days on my own to do my own research. So we were pretty much hiking glaciers every day. We, this was actually glacier. We were literally walking on glacier, pretty cool. We would ride zodiacs. So zodiacs are these inflatable little boats. And we traveled in a big boat, but to get on land, we had to travel on the zodiacs because the big boats could get stuck too close. So we would ride the zodiacs to land, or we would sit there and watch sea ice. It was pretty incredible. That was myself. It's really cool. There are 2 other artists from Hong Kong this year, actually, so that was really quite a treat. There were 30 artists, all incredibly talented. We have filmmakers, writers, journalists, poets, sound artists, painter, you name it. Everyone is super talented, and we all work on our own Arctic projects. I'll share work from one other people this time. This was a very typical scene that we would see, and in fact, actually, normally people don't. You see how empty the landscapes are. So even though Svalbard, it's so sparsely populated compared to Hong Kong, this is very rare. I was actually supposed to go on this trip in 2020, but because of COVID, it was delayed until last year. That's why we went in October, November, and not in the summer, not in spring or summer, which is normally the time they go. So if you're interested in Arctic pioneer history, you know that people don't travel to the Arctic this late because there's always a danger to get trapped by sea ice, and then your 2-week trip becomes a 2-year trip if you're lucky to survive it. But because they had to squeeze in so many trips in a year to catch up after COVID, that we got to go so late in the year, and it was just so empty. It was so magical, and in fact, after the 2 weeks, I was so familiar with everyone. I could literally see someone's back or silhouette or someone's hat, and then I was like, oh hey Julie, oh hey Mary, and we were that familiar. And when we went back to the 1,000 people town, I was completely culture shocked. I couldn't handle strangers, I couldn't just look at people I didn't know, I couldn't just walk into a shop, I was completely shell-shocked. Pretty magical experience. We, as I said, we watched sea ice, and it's really hard to share the same magic, but I will try with a video for half a minute. So there was this afternoon where we circled half a wall. It's like a horseshoe-shaped glacier. We spent the entire afternoon going back and forth in front of a glacier. For a few hours, no one talked. We only heard birds flying past and also the glaciers carving. It was really heartbreaking because we kept watching bits of the glaciers falling. It was really quiet. I hope you will hear a bit of sound. Let's try. What's this one? So you could hear just a little bit of white noise. It was actually the ice crashing into each other and then also parts of the glacier falling. This was a very typical scene that we would see every day. I'm gonna quote some more from My World is Melting. When the United Nations warns that global warming of more than 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial will bring harmful consequences, the annual temperature in Longyearbyen has already increased by 3.8 Celsius degrees since measurements started in 1898. So there are different measurements. Some say Svalbard is warming 5 times more than the rest of the world. Some say it's 6 times more than the rest of the world. Huge problems. If we count from 1961, the start of the so-called normal period, the average temperature in Svalbard has risen by 5.6 degrees Celsius. In comparison, the temperature in Oslo has risen by 2 degrees Celsius during the same time span. The global temperature has increased by 0.9 degrees Celsius. To put it further into perspective, the temperature increase in Svalbard is 3 times higher than Oslo and 6 times higher than the rest of the world. Pretty frightening. The more snow they melt, the more rain we have. So not only that, okay, so we know it's bad for us, but it's so much more immediate for them and so much more naked as well. So actually, after a month, I was so familiar with Longyearbyen, and I walked past these structures every day. And then just on the last day, I just asked my friend Marius casually, I was like, so what are those things on the mountain? I finally asked, and he was like, oh, so these are protected shields from the avalanche. In 2015, there was an avalanche from the mountain in Longyearbyen that crushed half the town. 1 adult and 1 child died from that. As a result, they actually moved half the town over. So if you think of it, 30 houses in Longyearbyen is a lot. They literally just give up on that area and then just build a new part of town somewhere else where they project will be safe for the next 50 years. So I want to read you a part of the personal experience. Her body is completely stuck. Ellie Ann Erstel thinks she's lying on her stomach, maybe under the kitchen table. because there is smashed wood near her face. She can move her right hand a bit, and with it she feels some pieces of wood from somewhere in the snow. She can hear her friend's 2-year-old crying. Pretty emotional. The 2-year-old survives, her friend didn't. Very tragic. Then everything goes quiet. She assumes from the silence that everyone is dead. Her 2 friends and their children. And now, at 33 years old, she's dying right before Christmas, on December 19, 2015. I showed you earlier that we had a glacier right behind my guest house. So, and I also told you I started hiking out there. So I was doing this glacier hike with my new friends, and actually they built the new protective shields, and the author was admiring the new shields the year after. So we climbed this. I really felt like I was in Lord of the Rings. We had to hike in procession as well. Sukhothopin stands behind the center of Longyearbyen, rising 371 meters over the sea. On July 18, 2018, a summer day so warm that both of us have ditched our woolen leggings. Meteorologist Ellie Ann Erstel and I walked towards the mountain to check out the 2 new avalanche fences. They are the first permanent protective barriers built after the avalanches. I'm gonna skip that. Okay, so as promised, I'm going to talk about my art. As Victoria said, my lifelong project is building this futuristic world in 2084. There are 5 imaginary countries. We have Contradictoria, the Republic of Strata, the Aristocratic Union, Dreamland, and Northlandia, which is the star of today's talk. And yes, I will work on this until year 2084. It's an ongoing project since 2015. Today, I will only focus on the body of works I created in Svalbard. So actually, this trip was the first part of the Northlandia project. Even though I began research in summer of 2019, I read so many books, watched so many documentaries, but it was so distant. Even though I've seen snow before, I grew up in Canada, I just couldn't create an Arctic country from imagination when it's 35 degrees out. I just couldn't do it. My imagination wasn't strong enough. So my first, I went to Svalbard thinking, okay, I need to develop the skeleton that I already have, and I needed to collect visual motif. Northlandia is an Arctic country where the Ice Queen, a polar bear ice sculpture, wants to protect her country and really save her country from the rest of the world. So on this trip, I carved 22, 24 wood blocks, and I brought some of them to show you, and they were printed afterwards in Hong Kong. I'm gonna play a short video to show you how I did that. So yes, it was cold. My fingers were frozen half the time, especially when I sketched on site. It was much nicer when I could carve inside the boat or in my room. Yeah, it was pretty intense. So there are 24 in the collection. I brought seven to show you today. And this is just going to be the first body of work in Northlandia. I'm already making new works. It's been almost a year. They have not been public yet, but I'm really excited. I'm making them every day. In fact, this afternoon I'll go back and work on them. They were printed. You see 2 of them in flesh here. Oh, and even though I carved the blocks in Svalbard, they were printed in Hong Kong. So this is how they're printed. They're all printed by hand. You have to roll ink on and then you print them by hand. We have screwed up a lot. If you have technical questions for me afterwards, feel free to come to me afterwards or ask during Q&A. I'm gonna spend the rest of the time sharing some of the artwork stories because I know that's what half of you are here for. That was my first glacier hike. I was so cold. The snow came up to here. Literally, I felt so short because I stepped and then I would go like this. And it was really, really cold. My fingers were completely frozen. I saw these incredible ice shapes. Remember, we were on a glacier, but there were so many layers of ice on top of the glacier, just of centuries and centuries and millennia of snow and ice, but it was so snowy that day that most of the ice was covered by snow. But because of the wind, the shapes were changing constantly. And I saw them and I was like, oh my god, that is so beautiful. I have no idea what I'll do with them, but I took so many photos. I took more photos than I could remember. 2 weeks later, when I had to come up with an official map of Northlandia, I remembered those ice formations. So I actually went back to all my photos, picked my favorite one, and I made it literally into the territory of Northlandia. And this is the capital of Northlandia. I I was figuring out what should the name be, and I actually started asking my friends on social media. And we finally decided on the name Longyearbyen. So remember, bien is the Norwegian word for town, so this would be the polar town. Not only is it super suiting because it's a polar, literally a polar town because it's in the Arctic, but the queen is a polar bear. So I just thought, oh, so many layers, it works perfectly. And here we have three animals that I saw on this trip with a polar bear, a minke whale, and ptarmigans. Ptarmigans are baby birds, they're really small, but they're the only birds that are strong enough to winter in Svalbard. They're pretty cool. So that's the actual print. This was the glacier behind my guest house. Even though I was only there for a month, but the weather changed so rapidly, it looked different every day. And this was more or less my window view. So I really wanted to put it into my works. And actually, the Ice Queen has a mountain-sized ice cream maker in the shape of a penguin. And then lots of people, they're like, no, Michelle, like, so they either say, okay, Michelle, there are no penguins in the Arctic, or they say, did you see any penguins? So I said, well, I only saw one that's mountain-sized, because I do not plan to make an Antarctica country, so I just have to put a penguin here. So in the background, I put the glacier in. And that's the final print. Oh my god, that was day one after the boat. We landed, and then our leader Sarah said, okay, guys, go out, go to the deck now. We all rushed out. You hear nothing except for photo clicking. And everyone's like, it was just such a magical experience. And in fact, do you see the moon there up top? The little speck?
Oh, yeah.
You actually see the sun and the moon together behind the glacier. It was so incredible. And it was my first time seeing the glacier from this angle. We stayed there for the entire morning. I was so in love with the glacier, and that was where I sketched the igloo. So the Ice Queen actually has a ton of giant igloos built to cover the glaciers to stop them from melting. Okay, I'm not a scientist, but I know it doesn't work. So in my works, I use often this humor and absurdity, this absurd logic, to really challenge my viewers, because no one's gonna tell me that, yes, Michelle is really going to work, we should invest the next $1 billion into this great climate change solution. But it often stops people in their track and think, hey, there's something wrong with this picture. What's wrong with our picture? That's the final work. And my friend Sergey, who lives in Longyearbyen, it's his favorite because he said, Michelle, this is my favorite because it's such a quintessential Arctic image. You have the sea ice, you have the glacier, you have the mountain, you have the snow, and you have the igloo. I love this one as well. That's the final print. Okay, so we have the giant igloos, but who built them? Of course, the Arctic hares, right? And no, I did not see any Arctic hares on this trip, but they're my favorite. They're my favorite Arctic animals. Just don't tell the other animals that, but they're definitely my favorite. So even before the trip, I had decided I have to just make a ton of Arctic hares, and they have to be just completely round like a cotton ball because they're so fat and they're so incredibly adorable, so cute. So we have a team of Arctic hare construction workers building these giant igloos, but they do that under the help of the Arctic fox, who is an engineer. And I think the Arctic fox is a tribute to my father, who is a retired engineer. I also want to take this opportunity to just sneak in a thank you to my mother, who showed up today. She traveled all the way from Wuhan to be here. So thank you, Mom. So that's the Arctic hares and the Arctic fox engineer. Wow, okay. We did a lot of hiking and lots of glacier hiking. This was the most beautiful glaciers I've ever seen. It looks like a cake, it looks layered, it looks so delicate. It was a pretty hard hiking day. We were hiking up and then we were just almost gonna make it to the ridge. And Thomas and I, we were the first to arrive, the leader and I. And then we just went there completely in awe. He had never seen it before because remember, even though the guides, we have 4 wilderness guides with us actually. If we have time, we can talk more about that. And even though they've been all over in Svalbard, 1, they can't go everywhere because it's always super weather dependent. And 2, even though you've been to the same place, it looks different even 2 hours later. So just because you've been to that place, it doesn't mean it'll look the same tomorrow or even in 2 hours. So we looked down and then we were in awe. So after about 10 seconds, we recovered. And then we encouraged the other, come on, it's really worth it, it's really worth it. It was such an incredible scene. So I had to make the bravest, strongest bird, the ptarmigans. These are the male ptarmigans and the female ptarmigans, into a huge protective bird. So they're the sort of guarding spirit of Northlandia, and they're surveying the land and the glaciers. And here you actually see a hyena carrying a rifle. And the hyena in my story is a southern explorer coming out to the north to steal resources. Interesting fact. In fact, all our guides, men, women, have to carry a rifle. In fact, in Longyearbyen, it's law that if you step outside town limit, the town is not very big, you have to carry a rifle. Why?
Bears? Polar bears?
Yes, that's exactly right. So you cannot walk outside of town unarmed. And I have a very complex, and I can't say a very loving relationship with guns. We're not going to get into gun issues today, but just let's say I don't like guns. But my impression with guns and my relationships with guns changed after this trip, and then I realized there are always so many sides to the story, because now I associate guns with protection as well, because it's literally our guards, that's Thomas by the way, and their guns, that's between the wilderness, danger, and us. And there was one day that we had to evacuate back to the boat because we did have a polar bear on land. So it's very real. It's not just a story. That's the finished blog, and that's the print. Okay, yes, we did see the Northern Lights. We saw it so many times that towards the end, it was so bloody cold that a lot of the members just said, okay, I'm going back in. I'm going back to sleep. I've had enough Northern Lights. I probably saw it 4 to 5 times on my trip. It's pretty spectacular. We have the magician warriors in Northlandia. So not only do they catch wild Northern Lights with the fishing net, I know it doesn't work, but they also cultivate artificial ones. And a lot of people, they are in love with the seals. Okay, we saw so many seals on this trip. Have you seen seals as well? Some of you have. Are they nosy?
A little.
Mine were. They were so nosy. They followed our boat. Were they playful? Yeah, they were always poking their heads out. What's happening? What's happening? And I want to share, so these are the seals in Polar-night, and these are the seals in midnight sun. I was telling you that during Polar-night, we have 3 months of complete darkness. But in fact, the Arctic has exactly the same amount of annual sunlight as the tropic. The distribution is just all wonky. So of course there are no trees in the Arctic, and it's really hard to plant anything, but there is a greenhouse. So the Ice Queen actually commissions her seals to be military soldiers. And if you've seen seals, you know it's the most horrible choice. So these are torpedoes, but the seals think they're fish. So I ended up actually carving a lot more seals than I thought because we just saw so many of them. But my really favorite story is with my roommate on this trip. She's a Canadian musician, Bea Labikova. Amazing, amazing musician. She was actually performing her music in the Arctic. Yes, it was very cold and she was really cold. Okay, do not recommend this outfit. She was doing this for her performance. Do not recommend it. She was actually playing on the ice. And we were just all over, and then I heard her music, and then I just drew closer. And then I realized I wasn't the only audience. There were 3 seals that popped up, stayed in the water, stared at her, stayed for the entire performance. So I am now the worst magician. Ding, 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 ding. You guys are all seals. For the next 30 seconds, I want you to experience the Arctic music magic. And then you can imagine yourself sunbathing in the icy cold water, listening to Bea's music. The actual performance was maybe 10 to 15 minutes, really too long for her outfit, but the seals really stayed for the entire performance. Magical things happen in the Arctic. I think this is the last artwork I'm gonna share here. As we know that we have more and more issues with the climate, and we have people who are more vulnerable and more impacted by climate change. So these people move around because living at home is no longer feasible. We're super lucky in Hong Kong because we're very rich, and then the governments can actually deal with all the disasters. But not everyone can. So this work is the climate refugee, and you can see all the animals. None of them is Arctic animals, so you'll see more in the next image. We have a buffalo, a hippo, a crocodile, a crocodile, a hippo, a buffalo, a sheep, a monkey, a turtle. So they're actually running away from home because they can't live at home anymore. So I want to finish the presentation with a quote from Sonja, Queen Sonja from Norway. Svalbard is a thermometer for the rest of the world, and here we feel the changes in the climate. They're more tangible and measurable this far north than many other places in the world. We worry about the animals' changing habitat and the ice withdrawal, and we know deep down that it is we who are responsible for much of what is happening. We feel very close to life and the planets here in Svalbard, even though, paradoxically, it is so far away from the world's center of power. But those of us who have become enthralled by Svalbard understand that. We must do everything we can to protect this planet shared by 7 billion people. So I have seen the magic of Svalbard. I hope to see other parts of the Arctic and continue with my project. But if this presentation touched you in any way, think if there's one small thing that you can change in your life today. Maybe you eat one more vegetarian meal per week. Maybe you don't use disposable plastic bags. Maybe you use the fan instead of aircon, or just use the fan with your aircon. It's already 30% more efficient. So think of the very small ways that you can start to make changes. And I promise you, people around you will see that. So I hope no one has fallen asleep and you have been paying attention because we have special prizes.
Ooh, okay, so how do we, I guess you'll be asking questions?
I have 3 questions. 2 of them are testing questions, like have you been listening questions, okay? One of them is your intelligence question. It's something we have not covered in the presentation. These are handmade cards of the works. These are not for sale, so you can't even buy them afterwards. So I have 3 packs. Each pack has 3 of them. All right, so first question. Is it correct to say that it's illegal to be born and die in Svalbard?
Damien? Or the student? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Can you give me a bit more? Because it's not just that. It's actually not illegal, but it's a little bit more than that.
Yeah. If we need to deliver the birth, we have to. The people there have to go to Norway to give the birth. Okay, and then and because the temperature, that body can't decompose this easily. That's why. That body will be removed to the mainland.
Perfect, yes, because thank you, great job.
Okay, I will give this one to Damien. Ooh, very pretty cards.
So there are no hospitals in Svalbard, that's why you have to give birth in Norway on the mainland. All right, next question. Why, okay. Actually, I don't know if I actually talked about this in the presentation. So it's either a test question or an intelligence question. How are polar bears carried away from town? So when polar bears come into town, you cannot let them stay, right? You have to take them away. How are they carried out? Okay, I probably did not.
By boat?
Good guess, but actually incorrect.
Okay.
By boats is a really good guess.
Helicopter.
Yes! They are carried away by helicopters.
Well done.
Super fancy. Good job. I was shocked when Sergey told me that. I felt so dumb. I just looked at him for a minute. What are you talking about? All right, last question. Definitely an intelligent question. Law. This is a law. You cannot find any cats in Svalbard. In fact, it's illegal to have cats in Svalbard. Why? Think of the craziest thing.
They catch bugs.
Yes!
Well done.
Oh my god, USC students are so smart. I love it. Yes, so because cats, they actually chase birds and they scare them away and they hurt wildlife. So you cannot find any cats in Svalbard. Really great job. I hope you guys really have fun. And can we just have a huge round of applause for everyone who tried and who got the questions? Really, really great job.
Well done. Oh,
Okay, I'm just gonna wrap up. So if you're disappointed you didn't get the question, I actually have something better for you. So I'm doing a giveaway for one of these original prints. You can ask me afterwards, and then, or you can enter online here as well. Okay? And this world of Northlandia and 2084 will continue to build. If you want to hear more about other aspects of the project or see where this project goes or where in the Arctic I'll go next, I invite you to follow me. And thank you so much for having me today.
Okay, wow, thank you. And now we have plenty of time for questions and answers. So the floor is open. Who has something they want to ask or say? Comments are also welcome.
And no stupid question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No such thing as a stupid question.
I probably asked more stupid questions than all of you combined together.
Okay, well then I'll do an ice-breaking question.
Please.
Can you share on your vision of exploring different lands in 2084? In addition to Northlandia, what are your other countries and how did you come up with them?
Yeah, so as I said, there are 5 imaginary countries altogether, right? Actually, I've already worked on Contradictoria since 2015, so that's 8 years. And this is the second country, so Northlandia is actually the second country I've worked on. So each country probably roughly takes 10 years, and it definitely will take me until 2084. And each country represents an environmental issue in my mind. Air pollution, drought, flood, Arctic resources, and climate refugee. So each country has a lot of different media like animation, drawing, performances, installations. And in fact, the exhibition here at the library in 2019, Plastic Everywhere, is the prelude. So everything is super interconnected. We don't have 6 hours today, so that's all I'm sharing.
Okay, thank you. So does people have other questions? Okay, let's see. You first and then you, and then we'll do some.
I heard you talking about you and the other 20 or 30 people circle around to watch the glacier collapse and melt in complete silence. I'm really curious about how do you actually feel at that time?
I think at that time I felt really overwhelmed and in awe. And actually that's a really great question because I think all of us are still processing it. We became really intense, intimate friends, and each of our reactions are different. So some artists became very guilty for taking this carbon intensive trip. Some artists became very pessimistic. We had some artists who started crying and had to go back to their room. We had people who want to see other parts of the Arctic. Not on this trip, but in the past, there were artists who decided to move to Longyearbyen. So the reaction is very different, and I think it's very rich and intense and very deep. And we actually had very, very lively debates on whether we should be on this trip and what right do we have to exchange this life-changing, magical, incredible experience of a lifetime for all the ice that melts because of this trip. It's very complex.
Thank you. Okay.
I was wondering how can us, like me, get an opportunity to go to the Arctic? I mean, where can I get the information or from where? Thank you.
Okay, sure. So how can you get to the Arctic? First of all, you can go as a tourist. Just save money, you can go tomorrow. And so maybe it's more a business school question, how can I make more money? But as I said, Longyearbyen has become a very popular tourist destination, especially over the past 2-3 years. I'm seeing traveling blogs even in Chinese, on Longyearbyen. So it's a very popular tourist destination. But if you want to do something a bit cooler, then you should have a research area that's related to the Arctic. And there are actually a lot of programs that you can travel to the Arctic and conduct research. There are programs in Greenland actually, and we actually also went 3 hours north of Longyearbyen. We went to Albertson. It's a research center, so it's not a town, it's a research center. They also have a 2-week residency program. So there are a lot of options. Or Iceland, there are 1 million artist residency programs, which just means, and then there are also scholar programs. So you need to have an Arctic-centric or a strong project, but then even before that or in conjunction with that, you need to build your own portfolio. Whether if you're a writer, then you need to build your writing portfolio. If you're a musician, you need to build your music portfolio. If you're a sociologist, then you need to build your research portfolio. It doesn't really matter. Once your portfolio is strong enough, you get to go, I promise you.
All right, more questions?
I'm really curious about what inspired you to start to do this such a special kind of art, because like crafting on a board or and making such beautiful and artwork. So yeah, because I've never seen that before, and so I'm really curious about the things what you're doing.
Sure. So you mean the woodcut, right? Specifically. Sure. So actually, when I was working on the first country, Contradictoria, I was researching, and as part of that world, I learned about the new woodcut movement in the 30s and 40s in China. So Lu Xun advocating the use of woodcuts to really promote working class ideology. And then when I read about that history, it was perfect for my country, for my world. So it was very conceptual. Even before I knew how to do this, I'm totally self-taught. I just decided, this is perfect, I'm gonna go for it. So because of that, I knew it had to be woodcut, and then I just taught myself to do it. That's another huge project of 99 woodcuts that's been ongoing for 6 years, and I'm gonna finish it in 2 years. I'm now at something like 55. Did that answer your question? Yeah, and then I just continued. Also, when I went to Svalbard, I wanted to do something portable and fast.
Okay, sorry, follow-up question.
Yeah.
You said you were completely self-taught, so
Yes.
did you use books, watch YouTube videos, or how did you or
Oh
you
my
just sat down with the how did you even know which tools to choose?
A million mistakes. Okay. At first, literally, I had my friend take me to Dafen village in Shenzhen, and I just bought the first box of tools and the first wood I saw. I don't use those anymore. They're both really, really bad. But it was in stages. So I did the first 20, and then I realized I made so many mistakes. My back hurts, excruciating pain, and then I just had a lot of basic problems. So I did what I always do. I went to the library, no joke, and I signed out all the woodcuts books from all the university library system. I read all of them, took me 6 months. I jumped a lot. I did a couple dozen more, and each experience taught me a lot. I improved a lot after this. Earlier this year, I was invited to a residency in Shenzhen at Guanlan Printmaking Base. It's the longest running printmaking institute in China. My skill level jumped 10 steps. So I'm always learning. When someone recommends a good book, I always read it. After each book, I jump. So I just never stop learning. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, that's a great, thank you, yes, so inspiring. Okay, other
And use the
questions?
library. This library is great. Really, I'm a huge fan of libraries. I think they're wonderful institutions.
Okay, more questions. Okay, I have another one.
Yes.
Okay, so now this one is a little, so I guess it's a question about, there's aesthetics, there's beauty, there's whimsy, there's all these lovely things in it, but also a strong environmental message And so as an artist, how do you balance those two? And sometimes do you feel that maybe you're going too hard one way or the other and end up thinking, well, this woodcut, even though technically it might be okay, it's not doing what I want?
That's a really great question, Victoria. Actually, unlike librarians, I think balance is not the word we think about.
Okay.
So what I think is really important for good art is genuine. Unless
Yes.
you feel something passionately and genuinely, is not going to come across in your art. So first of all, you have to really feel something about something. It could be anger, could be love, could be hatred, could be sadness. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's so strong and so intense that you have to tell someone about it. And most people tell someone about it by sharing it on social media or telling your best friend or complaining about it to your boyfriend and girlfriend, right? But we have an extra venue. We do it through our art. So when you feel so strongly about something, then it just really translates, and really the audiences can tell. Honest and dishonest art, you can really tell. And then I think what you said about balance is more if it's appropriate. If it's the appropriate medium, if this is the appropriate color, does it really translate what's my emotions? Or, okay, so if I look with my critical eyes from the technical point of view, is that the right color balance? Is that the right size? Blah, blah. But those are kind of after the facts. They sometimes come into play during production, they sometimes come after, or they sometimes is just not a consideration at all. But I really think it's the idea and the feeling that should be most important.
Okay, so genuineness, that's,
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
that's really, thank you very much. Okay, now come on, I'm sure some of you still have some questions or things that you, or remarks. Like, okay, I remember you came and you said you were interested in the arts, so do you want to ask a question or say anything?
Yeah, I think your woodcut is very powerful. So it's like walking into stories. I think how can you make the photos into the woodcut?
Okay, yeah. So how do I translate the photographs into woodcuts? So what I always tell my students, how do you draw something realistically? Step one is you need to be able to see. And if you see an apple tree, the things that an artist, a scientist, and a chef see is different. So first of all, you need to learn what to see. Okay? So what I see in a photograph is probably different from what you see because we have different training. And then once I see that, step two is going through the brain. I need to process it in my brain. I need to process, okay, I'm going to take out this pillar, I'm going to take out that chair, I'm going to focus on the light. Because I think the contrast between the blurry light and the colors and then the pattern, that's what's attracting me. So when I'm processing it, I'm eliminating everything else that's unimportant. That's kind of critical thinking, with technical training. And then step three, the last step, is the skills to be able to translate it with your medium and execute it, which is technical training, which is multi-skills, years of experiences, and then finally translate into the final product. Hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Now, as a follow-up to that, I remember you were saying before your talk that if you can read or write, you can draw, and the idea that nobody can, that I like how I can't draw, that's not true. So could you speak to that? Because I thought that was really interesting.
Yes, I have so much to say to that. I'll keep it very short. So because of the way our society functions, that we were taught to recognize objects and where we were taught to speak and write, basically to survive. And it's the skills that if you can follow instructions, you can execute those skills, right? Drawing is a skill that's not unlike writing or speaking. If you can speak, you can sing. If you can write, you can draw. So if you break down drawing into a lot of basic building blocks, shapes, shape recognition, directions, textures, a lot of basic building blocks, you can basically overcome each block at a time. And once you overcome them, then all of a sudden you can draw. And I would say everyone can learn to draw. You may not become a professional artist, but you can definitely draw. Just like you might not be a novelist or poet, but everyone in this room can write. It's definitely a very learnable skill.
Okay, thank you. That's really great. Now let's see. Do you have a question? Anybody here kind of shy?
So at this,
I have a question. How do you feel about this woodcut picture compared to other kind of art in picture?
my work or other people's works?
I mean, the different
Different
styles of picture. I mean, to me, this is kind of a picture to me, just with white and black colors. If you print it into a paper, then what are the key difference that you think is quite different from many other picture we can see in the art?
Or are you asking why sometimes she chooses black and white and sometimes she might choose other colors?
Or like other artworks in art history?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure, I could talk about that. So as I said, once I identify what's interesting, I need to figure out as a professional what's the most appropriate medium to really present my ideas, right? So I chose woodcuts because of practical reasons and also for personal stylistic reasons. Practical because I can share with a lot of people and I can realistically transport everything to the Arctic and back. And then stylistic choices. Why did I choose black and white? I also wanted a more simplistic, a more direct style because I didn't want the colors to be distracting. I wanted to be very basic. And if you ask me how this compares to the rest of art history, personally, I don't think that way, and I think it's an interesting but maybe not a relevant question. Because yes, I would compare my works maybe with other woodcut artists or other artists who make climate change-based works. I think that's very relevant. Why did they choose pastel? Why did they choose music? Why did they choose film? But if I compare this to, say, Mona Lisa, we're from such different cultures, such different history streams, that I don't think it's a fair or even useful relationship. Because one thing really important, whether you're an artist or whatever field you're in, you need to understand for yourself why I have this specialty. Okay, I have this specialty in climate change art because I really care about it. Or I really care about indigenous history in Taiwan because blah, 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 blah. Then you need to understand where you stand in the history of that knowledge, of that. So you need to understand where you stand in that stream. And you also need to understand, really important, what you're not. So I know I don't need to compare myself with Mona Lisa. I don't do oil paint. I'm not European. I've never studied there. I have nothing to do with France. So you need to differentiate. That's not me. Oh, that's me. But I'm different like this. So it's a very useful skill that you should differentiate. As the more you're specialized, the more you need to know why you're specialized and how you're specialized.
Okay, thank you. That was really interesting. Okay, so any last questions? Oh, wait. Well, I mean, people keep raising, we still have some time.
I noticed that there are many wild animals including your work, so how do you think the relationship between people, between nature and the animals in that town? Because there are not that much people in the town like
Yeah, so the relationship between the local residents and animals? Sure, that's a great question. I think the relationship is pretty complex, but also pretty direct. So it's complex in a sense that they are much closer to the animals than we are. I feel like we're way more sheltered, but the way local residents live, they hunt. Because, come on, groceries is expensive. And hunting is a way for them to actually sustain. And they have to deal with polar bears. I mean, we don't have to carry rifles in Hong Kong when we go hiking. So the danger is very real. Actually, Thomas, the guide I showed you, he had a polar bear encounter before. It was very traumatic. So the relationship they have with animals is very different from ours. It's very layered, but also very direct because it's so close. And we would always see deers wandering into town.
Okay, I have a follow-up question, and that is, in any of your imaginary worlds, are there human beings or are they all animals?
I'm still struggling
still
with
don't know yet.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, the Ice Queen's sister used to be like a human figure, but she's now changed into a narwhal. So you will have to follow me and see.
Okay, it's still developing. Okay, other questions? Okay, well then, if not, then I think we'll do our wrapping up. So first of all, everybody, let's just say thank you so much for her generosity and her creativity. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, and the next, a environmentally friendly token of our esteem. This is a library travel mug.
I love the library.
And
It's perfect.
Okay, so there, and okay, so we're asked to.
Oh, let's do you want to do the
yeah,
lecture background?
Yeah, let's do
Like the first one.
Yeah. Wow, so fast.
Something like 65 slides or
I'm
75.
going through history.
Travel and tide.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. All right, thank you. All right, thank you. Okay, and then before you go, please give your feedback. Okay, this is a survey form, and thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I really thought it was fascinating, so thanks again to you guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.